This book has to take the cake for the surprise of the year. If you're feeling sad, this is the story that will absolutely heal you from the inside out. Book number 27, I think I could get a little bit of hate for. This book just truly exhausted me. Honestly surpassed almost anything I've ever read. It truly feels sacrilegious to have an Emily Henry book rated this low. Continuing on with the tale of cursed new releases. Book number 5 might also be competing for the most wholesome book of the year, but she just does it so well. I really enjoyed these two together. Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. I recently just finished my 50th book of 2025, and I thought it would be fun if we did some rapid fire reviews of each of those books. But to make it more fun and engaging, we're gonna go through and rank those from 50 all the way to our top book of the year. I'm not going to go through and do a full synopsis of each of these books. If you want to hear more detailed thoughts on this, I will make sure to link my reading wrap-up playlist. But this is more so a quick fire way to see my reading taste and what books I think will be worth your time. Last year I did a full reading wrap up at the end of the year of over 100 books. That video was a beast to film, and I just really don't foresee myself doing that again this year. I'm more so thinking at the end of this year, maybe we'll do like 10 worst and 10 best, which will definitely be a bit more manageable to film and edit. But before we hop in, make sure to go down below, like, subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And let's talk about the 50 books that I've read in 2025. Even though we're starting at our worst books of the year, I really don't want you guys to think that a lot of these at the bottom are terrible books. There's really only like 3 or 4 books where I would say adamantly, I do not recommend this. And even with some of these lower rated books, I just really don't feel like they were to my personal reading taste. And that's why I ended up ranking them lower. But kicking it off with book number 50, this is definitely a book I would not recommend to you, and that is Summer Fridays by Suzanne Rendell. I did not realize when picking up this book that this book grossly would over-romanticize the cheating trope, and so much about our FMC and the relationship she was building while also being engaged to someone else just overall rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't find this book to be romantic whatsoever, and I really couldn't get behind our FMC. Therefore, this is one of the very few 1-star rated books of this entire year, and easily book number 50. From there, I have Fallen to Temptation by Lucy Score. This is book 2 in an interconnected romance series. I just found that this book had absolutely no plot. There was a lot of insta-love that we rushed into and way too much sex. For that reason, I couldn't get behind this book whatsoever. I didn't root for our characters or the relationship, and I believe this is the only other 1-star rating I gave for this year. Not straying far from that, book number 48 is No More Secrets, also by Lucy Score within that same series. The same problems arise within this one. She just writes a lot of sex with absolutely no plot. While that can be fun sometimes, it just didn't connect with me whatsoever, and I don't feel inspired to read anything more from this series. Now at book number 47, this is Killer Instinct by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is where we're starting to get into. I don't think this book is written poorly. It's just not to my taste. I unfortunately fell into the trap of buying all of the Natural series in a box set without realizing that mystery thrillers really aren't for me. I'm just too much of a wimp. Even though this is YA, I didn't like getting the perspective of the serial killer. It really freaked me out and it made me feel really gross inside. So therefore I rated this pretty low because I didn't enjoy my time while reading it, and I didn't want to continue the series from here. I do feel really bad about book number 46 because my friend did give me this book, so I'm so sorry. This is nothing personal. But book number 46 is The Sapling Cage by Margaret Killjoy. This is a YA coming-of-age witchy story which has some LGBT representation in it as well. Overall, all of those things I thought I would enjoy, but I just didn't connect with this writing style. There was a lot of telling, not showing, very little emotion weaved within the words, and it just overall felt very clinical of we're here, I felt this, I did this, I went here. I just couldn't get wrapped up in the story whatsoever because of that writing style. And even though this book was pretty short, I felt like it dragged because I wasn't connecting with our characters. Again, this is the start of a series which I unfortunately am not going to continue on from here. Number 45 is Finale by Stephanie Garber. This is book 3, the finale within the Caraval trilogy, which is a YA fantasy series that I unfortunately didn't connect to very much. The whole series, I think, prides itself on being a little bit of a fever dream, and I felt that strongly within this book as well. I feel like we kept going on so many side quests within this book that I kept losing track of where we were at in the story, our characters' motivations, and the overall plot. So because things felt so messy to me, I didn't enjoy my time while reading this, and it ended up with a fairly low rating. Another disappointing ending to a YA fantasy series was Fearless by Lauren Roberts. This is book 3 in the Powerless trilogy, and I am so heartbroken to say that this book ranked so low for me. I absolutely loved Powerless. It was a 5-star read. I don't know what the hell happened with Fearless. I feel like because Lauren Roberts received a lot of mixed reviews on book 2 in the series, Reckless, she ended up repeating a lot of the things we saw in book 1, I think as a little bit of fan service. Unfortunately, that fan service only anchored me more because this entire book's plot felt so unoriginal and frustratingly repetitive. I don't feel like our characters progressed in any way, and I didn't really enjoy where the story went. At number 43 was a recent read of mine, which is It's a Love Story by Annabelle Monaghan. I love Annabelle Monaghan for some quick, easy summer reads. Sadly with this one, I just really didn't enjoy our FMC whatsoever. Even though she was in her late 30s, she felt emotionally immature and very stunted to me. I think Annabelle Monaghan has written much better books from this, and if I had to recommend my favorite from her, it would definitely be Summer Romance, which she released last year. Book number 42 is Expiration Dates by Rebecca Searle. I was hopeful for this one because it is a super short book, and Rebecca Searle's books always have a magical realism tone to them as well. The whole setup of this book felt really weird to me. I felt like we didn't actually learn anything about our character until halfway in, and from there, because the book was so short, we only had 100 pages to connect to her and actually get to the whole point of the story. Because of that setup, I feel like we just had so much wasted time, lack of character development, and overall I had a lack of connection with our main character. Book number 41 is A Long Shadow by Olivia Atwater. This is book 3 in the Regency Fairy Tales trilogy, which started with Half a Soul. I really enjoyed Half a Soul, but I will say each of the books within this trilogy got a little less strong to me. Ending off with Long Shadow, which I feel like just didn't embody the best part of this series, which is how she makes commentary on society in fun, whimsical ways. As I've talked about with a lot of these books in the bottom 10, I just didn't connect to the plotline whatsoever, didn't connect with the characters, and overall at the end of this book I was kind of left with the feeling of what was the point? These next 10 that we're about to see are kind of in the lower 3 to 3.5 realm, and all of these I would say if you are interested in the plotline, go ahead and pick it up and try it out. Mainly I would say whenever books are within this rating range. I did enjoy the books, but they didn't make a lasting impact on me. So kicking it off with Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I'd already mentioned this book before because it is the start of the trilogy. I found that the best part of the start of this trilogy was the whimsical tone to it. It is very imaginative. I think Stephanie Garber does a great job of pulling you in and setting the scene. That being said, book 1 is in Scarlett's POV, and she's definitely my least favorite sister. She's just very naive and a bit impulsive. She enters into a lot of bad deals. Then unfortunately, I think a lot of her problems could have been avoided if she just used her brain a little bit more. Book number 39 is something that breaks my heart to have this low, and that would be Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. It truly feels sacrilegious to have an Emily Henry book rated this low. This new release is definitely my least favorite book she's ever written. I knew that this one took a much more literary fiction tone to it as opposed to her typical contemporary romance style. That being said, we had a subplot of romance within the story, and the romance was really what did it in for me. I felt like the connection between our two main characters was completely unbased and out of nowhere, and their insta-love really took me out of the story. Continuing on with the tale of cursed new releases, we have book number 38, which is Rebel Witch by Kristen Ciccarelli. This was the conclusion of the Crimson Moth duology, which I was so excited to get to. If you've read Lauren Roberts' Powerless trilogy, I feel like the setup and plot of Rebel Witch is extremely similar to Reckless within that series, where there's just a lot of cat and mouse between our two main characters, and we're kind of just going in this continual cycle of one saving the other, them getting in a fight, one saving the other, them getting in a fight, over and over and over again until we finally got to our conclusion. I felt like this book was way too long for how little happened within it, and sadly, nothing within this book took me by surprise. And at book number 37, let's just get the final book within the Caraval trilogy discussed and done with, which would be Legendary. This was my favorite book within the series. I think it was a solid 3 stars. We do follow the other sister, Donatella, within this story, and I just liked her a little bit more. She had a little bit more spunk and wit to her, and I did enjoy the love interest that we see within this book more as well. So even though this wasn't a perfect series to me or a perfect book, this one went by the quickest and I had the most fun with. Book number 36 was Savor It by Tara DeWitt. This is a small town grumpy sunshine romance with some forced proximity to it. For this one, I felt like the actual setup of the book was way too complicated and we didn't even get to all the things listed on the back of the book until about 50 to 60% of the way through. Also with the writing style, there was just something that kept me detached from it. I feel like the author just went on and on and on. It made paragraphs just way more complicated than they needed to be. I swear there would be run-on paragraphs that would take up the entire page within my Kindle, and I would have to reread to try and figure out what was the point she was trying to make. And this is a contemporary romance, so I feel like that's pretty uncharacteristic, and I'm hardly ever having to reread in that type of scenario unless I find the writing just to be very convoluted. Book number 35 is another recent read, which is The Spy and I by Tiana Smith. This book is really fun, but does have an extremely similar plotline to The Blonde Identity by Ally Carter. And because the plotlines were so similar, it was very easy to compare the two. And I just felt like this one didn't stack up to The Blonde Identity. And maybe I've just watched too many spy movies or read too many books, but unfortunately nothing in here took me by surprise. And I felt like our subplot of romance within the story really fell flat as well. Book number 34, I was so excited for, and I had so many people hype up in the comments, and that would be Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. I knew that this was going to be a silly and absurd fantasy, so I don't think that is what held me back from fully enjoying the story. I just felt like we didn't get enough depth to the characters or the surrounding world. Literally, the magic system within the story is never explained, and I don't feel like I had enough to attach myself to within the romance as well. So because of that, I just found this book to be very middle of the road, not something that made a lasting impact on me, and I'm very undecided on if I want to continue on with this series or not. Book number 33 was First Time Color by B.K. Borison. I read this right around Valentine's Day, which was the perfect time to pick this up. And this is a Sleepless in Seattle kind of reimagining where we have these two characters connect over a radio show, and from there a romance is built. I really loved the setup of this story and a lot of these side characters and relationships we see as well. At a certain point, I got super icked out by their spicy time, and from there I just felt very detached from the love story. Book number 32 is kind of a funny one. This is Love in Bloom by Lucy Eden. I say it's a funny one because while this seems to have a very basic contemporary romance plotline of a big city girl getting introduced to small town life, there's a plot twist that we learn midway through the book about the small town's farming operation. Definitely took me by surprise. I will say that it was very unique. That being said, nothing else within the book stood out to me, and the main characters and their relationship just fell a little bit flat. And that takes us to book number 31, which is The Atlas 6 by Olive E. Blake. I was really excited to get to this book because I had read another Olive E. Blake book, which I rated 5 stars. She does have very flowery, lush language. She definitely does not get to the point quickly, but I will say in the first book I read from her, I really did enjoy that fact. Unfortunately, it didn't work as well for me within the Atlas 6. Within this dark academia fantasy setting, we follow 6 different characters throughout the course of the year within this very prestigious magical academy. Because we are following 6 characters, 3 girls and 3 boys, it was very hard for me to distinguish 2 of the boy characters. And because of how messy and interwoven all of the relationships are between the 6, things just got very fuzzy and convoluted in my mind. Generally, at a 3.5 rating, I would continue on with a series like this. However, I have seen that book 3 within this trilogy is horribly rated, so I'm not really motivated to continue on from here. If you have read the entire trilogy, please let me know if you think it's worth continuing on. I'm leaning towards no because I wasn't fully obsessed with this story, but if you feel strongly otherwise, I could be talked into it. Okay, I just had to take a little snack break because I swear I'm going cross-eyed from staring at this camera with the ring light. But continuing on with book number 30. Now we're getting into my solid 3.5 stars and above ratings. So I would strongly say that all of these books I do recommend. But while I would recommend these next 10, there were just a few things that I didn't either love about the story or the characters that took down the ratings just a little bit. But for book number 30, that is 10,000 Stitches by Olivia Atwater. This is book 2 within the Half a Soul series that I discussed earlier. I did like this one because we watch a housemaid unintentionally team up with a fairy and start a household revolt. I enjoyed the messaging of this book, and I felt like the relationship that we see between our two main characters was quite funny and wholesome. It was a historical romance with a lot of that absurd humor, which funnily enough is very similar to our next book as well. Book number 29 is The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. This book honestly has such an absurd plotline. Taking place in like 1800s England, we follow a society of ladies who are all also pirates with magical flying houses. Truly, this book is absurd as that sounds. I would say that the main downfall of this book was the romance. I feel like if we just kept it to the shenanigans of this society, the book would have landed a little bit better for me. However, how the book ends and bringing in the romance plotline, I felt like was unnecessary and actually lowered my enjoyment. Book number 28 is Caught Up by Liz Tomford. This is book 3 in the Windy Cities sports romance series, which I feel like I have a fairly unpopular opinion on. I actually really enjoyed book 1, Mile High, and from there, my enjoyment has decreased just slightly. While following a famous MLB player, we get a single dad nanny romance develop. And I just felt like these two didn't make a whole lot of sense to be together. Their main motivators and desires in life drastically opposed each other. And I just feel like a lot of this book was the author trying to force them together, even though it didn't seem like they were a great match to begin with. These are a very fun, spicy time. So if you like sports romances with a large dash of spice, I think these are a fun summery read. Book number 27, I think I could get a little bit of hate for, and that is Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. I finished out my Throne of Glass reading in the first half of this year, and sadly, Heir of Fire is my least favorite book in the series. I feel like Selena's character development takes a big step backwards at the start of this book, and we get another book involving a lot of training, which a lot of the time felt like things we had already seen before. I obviously see how this book is necessary to the plot. I just don't think this plot was overly engaging to me, but you will see that other books within this series I rated much higher. Book number 26 is You with a View by Jessica Joyce. I have absolutely fallen in love with Jessica Joyce this year, so I wanted to make sure I got all of her books read. This was her debut to contemporary romance, and throughout the story I could feel that this was her debut. This is a rivals to lovers second chance romance that has a road trip element to it as well. On paper, I felt like this book was really fun. However, something about the dialogue, something about the characters ended up just feeling flat for me throughout the scenes. I feel like we were almost there, but I feel like just with a little bit of fine tweaking and further editing, this book could have been rated higher. That is absolutely not a diss to Jessica Joyce. I absolutely love her, and you will see how much I love her later on in this video. Book number 25 is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is a MM romance between the President of the United States' son and the Prince of England. Again, this is another rivals to lovers story where after these two cause an international incident, they're forced together to try and save face. And as they're forced together, they start to grow feelings towards one another. I ended up loving these two together, but I will say the actual structure of the book is mainly what docked this rating. One, I just felt like it was simply too long. For a contemporary romance, this just dragged on a little bit too much for me. And the chapter length was utterly bizarre to me. I think there was a few times where the chapter was at least 45 pages long and took place over the course of weeks. I have no idea why the author decided to structure it that way. I don't know why we wouldn't have just broken those up into more manageable chunks, but because of that, I felt like my flow throughout reading this was really disrupted. I will also warn you that this book is quite spicy. However, I felt like a lot of the dialogue at certain points was really immature, which was a bit confusing to me on why our characters would be written immaturely, yet so much spice would also be introduced throughout the story. Book number 24 is The Co-op by Tara DeWitt. This was my second book by this author, and I did end up enjoying this one a lot more than the first. There is a lot of tropes that go into the story, but it is a second chance, marriage of convenience, forced proximity romance, while these two characters are forced together while they renovate an apartment duplex left to them by their grandmothers. I think I am realizing with this story that I do enjoy a second chance romance. I feel like it leans to a lot more yearning within the story, and so I really did enjoy the dynamic of these two together. That said, this one has a very similar critique to her first story I read, and that the story overall is just a little bit too long and her paragraphs get way too long-winded. I feel like if she could be a little bit more succinct, I would absolutely love her stories. Book number 23 is A Risk Worth Taking by Jessica Joyce. This is a spicy holiday novella that takes place on New Year's Eve and shows a one-night stand that turns into a little bit more. This was just a fun, spicy time. If this was a full-length novel, I probably would have rated it higher just because I really enjoy Jessica Joyce's writing. That being said, how much can you connect two characters within 80 pages? But I would definitely recommend this during the holiday season. Book number 22 is Starling House by Alexi Harrow. This was an unexpected win for me because this book definitely did take me out of my comfort zone. I went into this expecting it to be a fantasy novel, but it does have undertones of horror as well. Because it's more paranormal horror, I ended up enjoying this, and I didn't find it too scary, even though I would say this genre massively intimidates me. Where I feel like the rating lowered a little bit with this book is at the end, whenever we finally get the answer to the point of the story. I feel like everything we had worked towards just dropped off a little bit. I don't feel like the answer was enough to everything that we worked towards. That being said, I did find the writing quite engaging and unique and would definitely be open to reading more by Alexi Harrow in the future. From there, at number 21, I have Girl Abroad by Elle Kennedy. This is another book that took me by surprise because I did not enter into this book with very high hopes. I feel like I had heard a lot of negative reviews about this book, and I feel bad for putting it off for as long as I did. We follow our FMC as she goes on a study abroad program in England for a year and accidentally ends up finding roommate accommodations in a house with 3 boys. And that's kind of the main plot line I had heard about this story. However, there is another subplot that focuses on this salacious family within British politics and uncovering their history and family drama, which that whole plot line I found really interesting and I think really bumped up the rating for this book. We're now at the top 20, which means we are now getting to the fun ones. These are all 4 stars and above, so I would very much recommend all of these books. At number 20, I have Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. As I mentioned earlier, Annabelle Monaghan just knows how to write a very quick and fun summary read. This follows a single mom in her whirlwind romance with a famous movie star. I really enjoyed watching a woman in her mid to late 30s refinding her voice, refinding that fun spark within life. And I will say that the third act conflict really took me by surprise in this one, but this is just such a quick and easy read. It's perfect to add to your summer TBR. At number 19, I have Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. This is another book within the Throne of Glass universe. This is a great book within the series. Unfortunately, it just wasn't one of my favorites. I did enjoy watching our inner circle being brought together and their bond strengthening, and I fell in love with some of our side characters a lot more within this book as well. Specifically, Lysandra and Manon, I think, had great character arcs within this story, but I felt a weird lull at the end of this story and really questioning where the story was going to go from here. At number 18 is The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. This is a really silly romance with a strong dose of magical realism because our FMC at the very start of this book chokes on a microwave burrito and ends up passing away. Once she's in the afterlife, she gets a second chance to go back to Earth if she's able to meet and fall in love with her soulmate within a 7-day time period. And the story that we see from there is really wholesome and sweet, and I really enjoyed watching her found family being built as she gets a second chance at life. At number 17 is Foxglove by Adeline Grace. This is book 2 within the Belladonna series, which is a YA new adult gothic romantasy. In book 1, we follow Signa, who has a very complicated relationship with death, who is personified throughout these books. And what I really enjoyed about Foxglove is not only are we watching Signa and Death's story reach a conclusion, but we also get introduced to a new character with a new love interest. And I feel like the melding of these 2 stories was perfectly done and only made me more excited for book 3, continuing on with that new character story. Book 16 is Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. This is a grumpy sunshine second chance romance between a wedding planner and a wedding florist. I read this book at the absolute perfect time because I read this throughout my wedding planning process, which I feel like just made me connect to these characters even more, especially as we watch these two being forced together to work on a very extravagant wedding. But I think I'm just obsessed with the love interest that Julie Soto manages to write. They are always very tortured, grumpy, quiet men, but she just does it so well. I really enjoyed these two together. Book 15 is Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. This is the finale to the Throne of Glass series. I know so many people that say this is the best book within the series, and while I agree that it is a masterpiece, this book just truly exhausted me, not only due to the length, but how emotional and drawn out some of these storylines really are. Additionally, there was a big plot line that we received starting from book 1 within the series and was working in the background all the way into the finale that the conclusion of was massively disappointing to me. I talk about that more in my Throne of Glass reading vlogs, but overall, I just felt like that one specific plot line was a huge disappointment. So that, coupled with it was just so emotionally draining, it lowered my rating for this just slightly. Our next book at my lucky number 14, is Out of the Woods by Hannah Bonham Young. This is book 2 in an interconnected romance series which follows Out on a Limb. And this is a marriage in trouble, second chance romance between two high school sweethearts, Sarah and Caleb. And really, instead of a romance, this book really read to me as a women's fiction novel, because we're in Sarah's head and we see her battling with so many realistic and raw emotions, working through the trauma of losing her mother at a very young age, and kind of the unhealthy relationship dynamic her and Caleb got into as he kind of developed a savior complex from that situation. Truly, I feel like the discussions within this book were just so raw and vulnerable that whenever we got to the romance section and the spicy time between these two, I was genuinely a little bit uncomfortable. I love seeing Sarah's story and her refinding herself, but I feel like if the romance and the spice within the story was toned down, I would have absolutely loved this. Book number 13 is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is the start of the Ember Quartet, where we mainly are following two characters, Laya and Elias. Laya is from a family of scholars who are currently being oppressed by the Martial Empire. Elias is a soldier currently in training at the Martial Empire's top training academy. And after Laya is forced to go undercover at this training academy, their stories become intertwined. I really enjoy this series. I feel like a lot of the messaging within it is super powerful. However, I will say, check your trigger warnings if you are interested. There are horrific acts taking place throughout this series, so it is very dark, but I will say, I think Sabaa Tahir has a purpose to introducing that to the story, and I've really enjoyed this series so far. Keeping on with that same line of thinking, number 12 is A Torch Against the Night within that same series. I liked this one just a touch more than book 1 because specifically some of the violence geared towards women was a little bit toned down in this book, so it was a little bit less triggering for me personally. But I do think at some points it was a little slow. I wish just a little bit more happened within this story. That being said, I plan on continuing on and finishing this series in the next few months, and I'm excited to see how those last two books rank at the end of this year. Book number 11 is Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. Again, another book in the Throne of Glass series. Sorry I'm having to talk about that series so much. There are just so many damn books within it. Tower of Dawn I was absolutely terrified for because this is the book that you do as a tandem read with Empire of Storms. And I feel like I've generally heard that this is one of the least favorite books within the series because we follow one side character as he goes to another continent and has a massive side quest that can feel pretty detached from the main storyline that we see. That being said, I ended up really falling in love with this character a whole lot more on his little side quest, and I feel like the best way to consume this book is through the tandem read 100%. And now we are at the best part of the video, which is the top 10 books of 2025 so far. Number 10 is one of the only new releases that has not disappointed me this year, and that would be Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is another prequel that got added on to the Hunger Games saga that follows Hamish's story. I loved getting more insight into Hamish. I think Hamish is one of the most well-loved characters within the series as a whole. I know a lot of people have recommended a full reread of the series before you get to this one, and while I think that's a great idea, what I did personally is I just rewatched all of the movies as well as The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes before getting into this one, which I would definitely recommend as well. If you haven't ever read or watched The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, please make sure to do so before you get to this book, because Snow's backstory and lore definitely has a huge impact on Hamish's story as well. Book number 9 is Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams. And again, this is one that took me pleasantly by surprise. This is book 3 in the When in Rome small town romance series. And I felt like book 1 and 2 were very mediocre to me. However, something about this book really worked for me. This is a rivals to lovers forced proximity romance between two second grade teachers who have known each other since college and just got off to a terrible foot whenever they first met, and things have only just gotten worse from there. Something about the banter between these two was so funny to me that I would audibly giggle, which is very rare for me to do, and I just love their relationship dynamic. One of my favorite things throughout this book is because of the forced proximity and that they are also neighbors. Almost every scene that we get within this book is them together. So I feel like even though this book is pretty short, because they had so much time together, as a reader you were really able to fall into and be immersed within their love story. Book number 8, I think, is my only nonfiction read of this entire year, and that would be Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. This is his memoir, which I think would even be amazing on paper because his life is so interesting, but I would highly recommend, if you're interested in this, picking up the audiobook because Matthew McConaughey himself narrates it, and if you know him, you also know his iconic voice. Really loved being able just to hear him speak for 6 or 7 hours, but I did also enjoy hearing stories about his life. Book number 7, I think, is one of the most wholesome books of the entire year, and that would be Ready or Not by Cara Stone. This is an accidental pregnancy story, which I think is equal parts romance and women's fiction. What I feel like is really unique about this one is who she ends up being with at the end of the story. All I'll say is that it is a massive slow burn with childhood friends to lovers that is so sweet, and I don't know how you could read this story and not fall in love with these two. Our MMC is the biggest golden retriever and just takes care of our FMC so well. Book number 6, I am so embarrassed that I put off for so long, but that would be Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I've talked about this book a ton and why I had delayed it for as long as I did, but I'm so happy to say that this is my favorite book I've ever read by Abby Jimenez. I think she did a phenomenal job throughout this story. This is book number 3 in an interconnected standalone series, and I would massively recommend that you read book 1, which is Part of Your World, and book 2, Yours Truly, before getting to this one, because characters that we see within both of those stories do play a considerable role within book 3. But within this one, we follow two characters who think they share the same curse, which is that whenever they date someone and break up, that person goes on to meet the love of their life. So they decide to team up and date each other, and in theory, they'll be able to offset one another's curses. And after they break up, they'll both be able to meet the love of their lives. I will say, even though that sounds like a really fun and silly premise, this is loaded with emotional depth. There are some scenes in this that are very hard to read, so if you have any triggers around child neglect, maybe consider that before hopping into this story, but otherwise I would highly recommend. Book number 5 might also be competing for the most wholesome book of the year, and that is Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This actually has a very similar plotline to Ready or Not because this is also an accidental pregnancy story, which was my introduction to this trope, and I have to say, I think I'm in love. Again, our MMC within the story is just a massive golden retriever, and you cannot help but love this man. If you're feeling sad, this is the story that will absolutely heal you from the inside out. Book number 4 is such a good read, and I have recommended this to so many people in my personal life, and that would be Not Another Love Song by Julie Soto. This is a very angsty love story between two musicians, and even though I don't have some massive connection to the musical world, something about the tension within this book honestly surpassed almost anything I've ever read. I loved watching our two main characters fall in love within this story, and also seeing how music was incorporated and ingrained in the love story as well. I said before, but I just love how Julie Soto writes her men, and she is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. Now book 3, I'm not sure if this is cheating because this is a reread, but it is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I feel like I had to include it because the first time I read this book, I rated it a 4 stars, and I truly don't know what I was thinking on that first initial rating. On the reread, this was easily a 5 stars and one of my favorite Emily Henry novels to date. This is a workplace rivals, grumpy dynamic between Nora and Charlie. And again, just the banter and tension that we see between these two is utterly perfection. I just absolutely love Nora and Charlie together. And I love the transition that we see within Nora from being known as the Ice Queen to warming up to someone and actually feeling safe enough to fall in love. Something about it is just so heartwarming to me and I relate to on some level, but I would highly recommend this book to just about anyone. Book number 2 is the final Throne of Glass mention that we're going to have throughout this video, and that would be Empire of Storms. This book has to take the cake for the surprise of the year because I cannot tell you how much I dreaded starting this book. As I had referenced previously, this is the book that you do in tandem with Tower of Dawn, and signing up for a 1,300-page tandem read was so intimidating to me. But I am now the tandem read's biggest supporter because I ended up loving both books so much. This is a high-stakes, action-packed book, which I think has the most epic scope out of the whole series. I absolutely love seeing how strong each of our female main characters becomes within this book, and I was seriously gripped from start to finish. And that brings us to our top book of the year, which is The X-Files by Jessica Joyce. This is the only book that I'm actually going to show physically because I have to just document the amount of tabs that I have throughout this book. Even though this is like a 350-page book, I have well over 100 tabs and highlights within this. My Goodreads review of this just says, inject every word of this into my veins, and I truly mean that. I would not change a single word within this story. This is the perfect depiction of a second chance romance as two exes are forced together to help save and plan their best friend's wedding. Not only is the yearning between these two characters actually palpable on the page, but the setting that takes place in a winery in Napa Valley just is added to the list of why this book is perfect and you need to pick it up as your next read. I will be shocked if anything overtakes this at the end of this year as the top read of 2025, because this is a book that I will recommend to anyone and everyone that will give me the time of day. So as I have you at the end of this video, please just go ahead and add this to your TBR, and I promise you will not regret it. And that brings us to the end of ranking every book that I have read this year. But hopefully at the end of this video, you're able to see if our reading tastes align. Or if you already know that our reading tastes align, this will help you prioritize what to put on your TBR as well. And after hearing about all the books that I've read this year, I really want to hear from you. Seeing all of these books and my opinions on them, what is a book that you think I would love? I really want to hear from you guys because I've been in such a reading mood. I really would love to learn about some books that maybe I've never heard of. So please leave me a comment down below letting me know. But for now, this is where I will love you and leave you. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe before you leave so that you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye guys.